The next two people have grappled with the complex realities of thinking through how does one implement a basic income. I want to introduce both speakers who are going to be talking about the PEI project, its history, details, and outcomes. The first is, I see Barbara over there and Trish. So the first that I'm going to talk about is Trish Altass. She's a community-based researcher and an advocate for policy development based on social determinants of health and basic income. And from 2019 to 2023, she was the PEI Green Party MLA for Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, and serving as the official opposition whip in that capacity. Trish was the chair for the all-party special committee that Marie talked about earlier of the PEI legislature, which recommended implementation of an island-wide demonstration project, and subsequently a member of the PEI Guaranteed Basic Income Project team from the beginning. She currently works as the research coordinator for the PEI status of women and actively advocates for implementation of the PEI project through provincial and national advocacy groups. So please welcome Trish Altass. And on my left here is Barbara Boraks, somebody I work with very closely through Coalition Canada Basic Income, Revenue de Base. Barbara Boraks is a highly respected interfaith leader who served as executive director of the Christian-Jewish Dialogue of Toronto for 31 years. This past year, and Barb didn't want me to put this in here, but I did anyway. This past year, Barb received the World Interfaith Award, which is an award that was established by the King of Jordan, interestingly enough. She's a founding member of Coalition Canada Basic Income, Revenue de Base, where she leads the Cases for Basic Income series, and Kristen talked about some of the cases that have been done in that series. Most recently, this series has produced cases for basic income in municipalities, homelessness, agriculture, and fisheries. With Tony Picard, Barb has co-led the PEI Guaranteed Basic Income Project since its inception. And so we look forward to hearing about the history, details, and outcomes that is grappling with the complex realities. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. There's a fantastic energy in the room, and thank you also to those who are tuning in from home. It is a Saturday, and it's quite inspiring and wonderful to see so many people who are here and committed to this cause on the weekend, even though nobody would want to be outside today because it's really quite terrible out. So as was mentioned, I had the great pleasure to work as part of the project team that Barb and Tony were had led. But it's interesting, I've never met Barb in person before today. So after working for all these years together, which is just lovely. So what we wanted to do was give you a little bit about, first of all, how we got here. So how did we get to the point where we have this incredibly detailed and thorough report that outlines a path forward for a demonstration project for basic income guarantee for PEI, tell you a bit about that report, and then talk about what to do next. What are the next steps? Now, I know many of you in this room are doing amazing work in your own communities and in your own provinces, particularly here in Nova Scotia, around basic income. So I wanted to give an outline of how things developed in PEI. Hopefully this will be helpful to advocates who are also working on this issue. Your path won't look the same as what's happened in PEI, but you may, I'd like to share a little bit about the different points where this moved forward at every stage and how we were able to leverage opportunities that came up to move this forward. So I guess we can go to the next slide. So I just wanted to start by acknowledging something that Marie Burge said, and I'm not sure where Marie has gone to, but okay, all right. Well, let me tell you, she is amazing. That woman is a force in the PEI community, and she has been a lead in the PEI working group for a livable income. I believe she said 21 years that they have been working on basic income guarantee in Prince Edward Island. I was very fortunate to join the working group around the time when they started doing some community engagement sessions across PEI, specifically around basic income. So these sessions were really interesting for a few reasons. They provided information in the community about what a basic income is, but also provided space for people to provide feedback, ask questions, and through that process, they were able to develop a made in PEI set of principles for what a basic income guarantee should look like. And that because they went through that process with communities and allowed people to engage throughout the island, it really helped with that buy-in and for people to feel ownership over this idea of a basic income and what could be possible for PEI. I want to also note one interesting thing about those community sessions is that some of them were co-hosted with politicians at both the federal and provincial level. That's just a little tip. So if you have politicians who are either outwardly supportive of basic income or who are maybe on the fence or maybe sort of maybe would be willing to speak out about it soon, this is a really good way to engage them, to invite them to partner with you on community consultations where they can hear from people in the community about their experiences directly, and people who are quite honestly in their voter base, if it's held in their own community, it's really helpful. So as a result of that, that push from the community, that groundswell, that grassroots movement, there were questions that were asked during a debate around basic income during the 2015 election. Barb and I actually recently just created a document on the Coalition Canada website that talks a little bit about debates and the role they can play in this movement and the opportunities that you can leverage with the debates during elections. So do have a look at that, because in this story, in the PEI basic income story, it was absolutely a turning point, and really only happened because of that grassroots movement. So at that point, there was a leaders debate where they were asked about basic income, and all of the four parties on PEI, all leaders spoke in support of the idea of basic income, not in great detail, but they said it. So it would be very easy for that to just have, flown by. So it happened in an election, and how many things do we hear in an election that don't actually happen, right? But this was able to be leveraged then to bring forward a motion in the legislature, motions that are non-binding, but it was a motion for all members of the Legislative Assembly essentially to give their support for a basic income guarantee for Prince Edward Island, which passed unanimously. So again, non-binding, nothing, government isn't tied to do anything at this point, but it's another step. Because that motion was passed, we were then able to eventually bring forward another motion to strike a special committee on poverty that, as part of its mandate for that committee, would put forward costed recommendations for a basic income guarantee. Because we already had support from everybody, the legislature had already voted on this. It wasn't necessary to say, let's examine this. We already had support. So, let's figure out what exactly it needs to look like. That was key. So there was no surprises. We knew that there was going to be recommendations put forward for basic income, but the process going through the process of engaging with experts from across the country, from people working with different services, different experts in PEI, and really having those conversations would help us develop that model, which we did. So in the special committee report, recommendations were put forward for a basic income guarantee, and they were costed with the help of the late Harvey Stevens. If anybody knows Harvey's work, he's incredible, and he was incredibly patient with the multi-party committee that was working on this. So credit to Harvey Stevens. So what happened next? So we can go to the next slide. Now, this is the part where, again, sometimes you don't know what's going to happen as you continue through. And we were so fortunate to have Barb and others who came together in Coalition Canada for Basic Income to see what was happening in PEI and say, hey, okay, this is something. So what can we do to further this work? Because, you know, it was a fully costed set of recommendations, but they were pretty basic, the costing. There was a lot more work that needed to be done and a lot of questions. So if you, they came together and developed this incredible idea of bringing politicians, economists, advocates, civil servants all together to work on a more fulsome report of what a basic income guarantee demonstration project for PEI could look like. And that was not an easy process. I can tell you that. You can go to the next slide. But what an incredible team. So, you know, you'll see some of the, if you can see some of the names, you know, especially the economists, I mean, wow. So, but I can tell you that in any of these groups, people didn't always agree right away. There was a lot of negotiation and discussion that needed to happen. It was such an interesting process. And when would you ever have, you know, you have many reports that economists create or, you know, documents that politicians produce as part of a political campaign or whatever. But to have them come together and work on something was complex, but it really, the report in the end was so much richer and better for it. So it's quite exciting what's been produced. All right, we can go to the next slide. So for the rest of the presentation, we're going to go over a little bit about the report and, you know, what are the implications for this type of demonstration project for poverty reduction, the benefits of it, and some of the potential labor market impacts, which were addressed by the economists in this report. We know this is one of the common questions you get about basic income. And I'll just say this, we can't shy away from those difficult questions. We got to face them head on, and this report actually does that. All right. Oh, yes. So just some of the key points, and then I'm going to hand it over to Barb. So some of the key details of the report. So it is delivered at 85% of the market basket measure. That was also the recommendation in the special committee report. So ideally, of course, the first thought when you see that is, well, it should be 100%. And I get that. Absolutely. I can say that as we went through this, the special committee, as well as through this detailed process with the economists, this was the sort of point where we could see the most significant impact on poverty levels. So reducing poverty at the most effective cost level. So after this point, as you start increasing the costs, you're only impacting poverty, the poverty levels by a tiny fraction for a lot of costs. So it shows us that this program really should be a floor below which nobody can fall, but then we still do need those targeted, those specific programs that will support different needs and demographics and those in the community who need a little bit more than this amount. So this is where the report falls, though, which is well above what any social assistance program is currently. Also, something that is different in this report that's never been done before was the use of the census family as the base family to calculate the benefit. And Barb's going to go into that in a little more detail, but it had a significant impact on the cost of the program without impacting the actual impact on levels of poverty. Really interesting. And it would be delivered federally through the tax system, like other programs that we have, which of course is always a little problematic because if you don't file your taxes, you're not going to be able to access this basic income. So we do need then to make sure we have programs in the community to support people to make sure they do file their taxes so they can access it. But it is the most simple and direct way to reach as many people as possible in the least discriminatory and clear way, just based on income. It's just based on income. So Barb, I think I'm going to hand it over to you. Is that okay?
I'll go to that mic, so you can jump in whenever you want.
I could just give you this
Okay,
one.
I'll go there. So you
Okay.
can jump.
All right. Okay.
Hi, everyone. So this slide looks pretty simple, but I'm going to spend a bit of time on it. It's a very important slide. And I'm going to talk about it by telling you two stories. A few months ago, part of the PEI team presented the PEI report to a pretty significant Ottawa-based policy think tank. So there are representatives there from the Parliamentary Budget Office, from the Prime Minister's Office, from Department of Finance, from appropriate ministries. And we were just talking, and I said, you know, I know that basic income is pretty low on the radar screen for your departments. And one of the wonderful young policy people said to me, you'd be surprised. She said, there is a lot of talk about basic income in the corridors, in the cafeteria, amongst staff. And the reason is because of the work of advocates. So the letters, the petitions, so to everyone here, to everyone online, and particularly shout out to Atlantic groups, like the work that done in Atlantic provinces is phenomenal. And most of us, rest of Canada, look to you, to what you do. So that advocacy work is successful. The conversations are taking place. Now for the flip side of that, there's another conversation I had. So the success of the advocacy world has allowed us to, and the PEI report has allowed us to start talking at very senior policy levels. And by senior policy, I'm talking about deputy ministers, assistant deputy ministers, people who are head of policy in large NGOs, labor groups, municipal organizations. So we're talking at that senior policy level. So one former deputy minister pulled me aside and said, you advocates, not just basic income, but advocacy in general, you all make the same mistake. You get in front of us, the policy people, because you've been successful in your advocacy work. And the advocacy work is usually based around the question, why? Why is basic income important? How does it affect people's lives? Why is it important to get this new innovation in place that can bring so many people out of poverty as well as affect our economies? You're successful, you get in front of us because you've answered the question, why? Then you get in front of us and you tell us the same thing all over again. You tell us why. We don't need to hear why. You're in front of us because you were successful with the why. We need to hear the how. We need to hear the what. We need the detail. And this is what the PEI report did. The PEI added, we answered those questions. Issues of cost, issues of financing, issues of labor market potential disruptions. Those are top of the list for every politician. How much? How do we finance it? What about the effect on communities? Those are always the first question. And you can't answer those questions by, again, going back to the why it's important. You have to be able to answer those questions. So the PEI report, and because of this amazing team of policy experts, politicians, economists who argued like hard over these issues, we came up with the report, which is full of detail. It's not a long report. It's not that hard to read. So I encourage everyone to read the report to understand what we mean by detail. There's another important part here, is detail is not the same as evidence. So we frequently hear sometimes the basic income advocates, we have enough evidence, why can't we just go forward? Well, for a policy person who works in that world, they define evidence differently. We may see the direct connection between income support and how it affects people's health, but they don't see that link directly to basic income because there are other ways of providing income support. There's a status quo approach. Yes, we know it's not a good approach, but it's still there. So that link between basic income and its effect on people's lives and other sectors is not as evident to policy people as it is to us. And that's not a criticism. They need different kind of work. Next slide, please. The next few slides are going to go into detail, some of the details that we have in the report. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. It's a very intense report. All the details are there. Many of the questions I'm sure that you're thinking of as I present these slides will be answered by reading the report. I'm only presenting them so you can see a bit of an example of the type of detail and questions that you have to go into when you do speak at senior policy and political levels. So as Trish noted, we're coming in at 85% of market basket measure. The reduction rate, it's 50%, which means if you are working, for every dollar you earn over and above the basic income rate, it's clawed back at 50%. So that incentive to work is built into the process. Who is eligible? Residents 18 to 64. We were also talking about, should it be extended to seniors? Should it be extended to youth under 18? We do have the Canada benefit now, which is developing quite well. Seniors through OAS and GIS, it works well. And actually, if we brought in seniors, they may actually be less well off under this proposal for a GBI. So let's not, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Let's just deal with the groups of people who are not being supported as they should be. The family income. Okay, so very quickly, the government uses 3 definitions of family. Nuclear, which is parents, children under 18. Census, parents, all children, irrespective of age. So if you have a 40-year-old at home, that's the census family. And economic, which is a broader definition of family. It can include aunts, uncles, etc. Currently, when people receive any type of social assistance, it's the nuclear family model. So most of the estimates that the Parliamentary Budget Office has done and others have all been using the nuclear family model. One of our economists realized that, some of the criticism actually that came from the economist world is using the nuclear family model, 40% of people who could potentially receive a basic income are aged 18 to 27, I think, 27, and they're living in high income households. So this is not good because you're giving money to people who may not need it. Now, again, if that youth decides to leave home and they have limited income, they would receive a basic income. But if living under the same roof as a high income earner, they would still receive a basic income under a nuclear family model. By expanding the definition of family to census, parents, all children, irrespective of age, we cut the cost of the basic income by 40%, while at the same time better targeting and being able to give more money to people who need it. So this was a massive innovation. To the extent that some discussions have already started taking place in government. Maybe we should start looking at delivering all programs through census family. Next slide, please. It's paid to every individual in the family. So even though net income will be defined by everyone's income under the roof, it doesn't go to one person and that person is expected to share it out. It'll go individually to every person in that household. Other income tested benefits, as we know, they stay in place. So basic income really only replaces what we know as welfare. Other income supports, they all stay in place. Next slide, please. The first part's a very important one. Trish already alluded to it. As basic advocates, we say, well, it's delivered through the federal tax system. Simple. No. The operationalizing and delivery of basic income is actually very, very complicated. One of the reasons is that social assistance programs are shared federally and provincially. In a nutshell, what we propose is that the basic income in itself is delivered through the federal tax system. However, that tax system is only assessed once a year. You put your tax forms in April and July, things change, and it stays that way till the following year, the following tax year. What happens if you fall on hard times within that tax year? And that's where the provincial systems come in place. So provincial systems will stay in place is our recommendation to help support those people who fall into hard times outside of the federal tax year, as well as other types of support which are provided at a provincial level. So that's basically covered. Okay, next slide, please. So there are some of the rates we're looking at. 85% through the census family, those are how poverty is being affected. Single mothers are still fairly high, a little bit too high for what we want to achieve. However, if we go to the next slide, what are the facts there? Yeah, everyone is left out of deep poverty, like everybody. So even we look at some of the rates, maybe they're not quite high enough. Understand that pretty well everyone is coming up to within about 93% of MBM, like bottom line everybody, and that's coming in at 85% delivery system. So there's a massive effect on poverty by using this kind of a model. Next step, please. Next slide. I won't go into too much detail here. It's a massive, very big concern of politicians and policy people is that, again, if you give people money, they won't work. Lots of calculations have been done on this issue by even those who don't support basic income. And basically it comes anywhere, depending on what report you read, anywhere from 1.5 to 1.7% impact. To put that in like easy terms, basically it comes down to, I think it's an hour and a half change in work per week for a person. So we're not talking about a big change. And we also expect to see over the years that would even lessen, because people would be going back to school, retraining, finding jobs they want to do, being happier in their work. So it's a really, really small labor impact, and we were actually able to model that. Next slide. Financing, again, big issue. There have been two of our federal politicians, when we started working together, our economists, and these are all very senior economists, they said, look, we can do anything. Like, we need parameters, and the parameters have to be from the politicians. It's the politicians who set the outline. We need to know what system we're working under. And our federal politicians, again, all very experienced, and this was nonpartisan. So we had Liberal, Conservative, and NDP at the table. And they all agreed, saying, all right, two things. There can be no changes to the federal tax system. It's a bugger trying to change the federal tax system. And if you're tying into implementation of a basic income to change the federal tax system, you don't have a hope. Forget it. So no changes to federal tax legislation, and financing cannot impact the middle class. It should only be impacting those in the higher income demographics. Historically, some of these suggestions and recommendations from basic income advocates is one way to pay for it is by taking away some of the tax credits. And it was but to do that, you need changes in tax legislation. And that also means if you change tax credits, this impacts the middle class negatively. So we moved away from there, and recommendations are various ways, but in a nutshell, raising the income tax a very small amount on the highest income earners. That would be at the provincial level. The federal level, again, it could be the same, but the federal level has a much larger budget than a province like PEI. Next slide, please. The report also goes into all these other areas. Earlier, someone asked, what about how was debt be managed? What about youth? Youth is a young adults. It's one of those very complex demographics. People are going to post-high school. They could be going to university. They could be finding work. They're changing jobs. They're like, long a period of extended time in school. It's a very, very complex area. So on our report site, actually, not just the report, but we have 3 supplementary notes dealing much more in depth with the issues of youth, net cost of the program, as well as evaluation. I'll just take a second on that. The evaluation is a very, very, very important topic. We're looking at a 5 to 7 year demonstration project, which I'll go into in a minute, but evaluating it's the wonderful thing about having this potentially, and hopefully in PEI, it's full province. This is the whole province who will be participating. What this means, we're not just evaluating how a basic income affects lives. We have a lot of that information. We will continue to do that. But the more important aspect is we'll be able to evaluate federal and provincial administrative interaction. How do the programs fit together? And when it's a full province, and economists or anyone who's a researcher will say, well, where's the control group? You can't just evaluate without having a control group. And that it could be a recommendation or suggestions, as it could be off province in Nova Scotia or New Brunswick. Next slide, please. So as I just noted, we're asking for a demonstration project, which is more than a pilot. When you hear pilot, people think of a smaller area, a smaller group of people, for example, in Ontario, a few thousand, in Manitoba, again, a few thousand, and they're only studying how basic income affects people's lives. We're looking at a full province demonstration project, and it's not just about studying the interaction between administrative areas, but also finessing them. So if this doesn't work, let's try this. If this doesn't work, just try this. And you know, in an ideal world, we'd be able to do enough of this work within a few years, the first few years, to allow rollouts in other provinces. But that's an ideal. It doesn't mean we have to wait for 7 years and then decide. It's about learning as we go and being able to roll out, but that's an ideal world. We're asking the federal and provincial governments to negotiate, to get to the table, the federal and PEI provinces, to get together and negotiate a demonstration project, which leads us to the next slide. We got it. We got a working group. It sounds great, but don't get your hopes up. And I'll be honest with you, none of us expected this. None of us. I think a huge reason for why we got this is because of the continual grassroots work that goes on in PEI. PEI, they don't stop pushing. And that's one of the reasons that have led to, as Trish noted and Marie did earlier, Provincial Minister Ramsey asked Federal Minister Suds, can we have a working group? And lo and behold, she said, okay. We didn't, honestly, none of us expected this. But, so, we reveled in that, great, but we have so much work to do. And this is just a very initial working group. We don't even know what they're talking about yet, which is a bit perturbing, I have to tell you. It may go forward, it may not go forward. This is not a negotiating table. This is just where they're probably starting to talk about what they want to talk about. So what we need from everyone here, next slide, please. We need you to keep pushing. We need you to read the report. We need you to understand or just get a grasp of the type of detail, what we mean when we say, how do we do it? It'll give you a grasp of the type of conversations that take place at senior policy levels. It's not the why, it's the how. When you do speak to your MP or policy people, understand who the audience is. Is it someone who still needs to hear why? Is it someone who's new to basic income? Someone you have to push those stories and talk about the whys and the importance? That's your audience. But if it's someone who's aware of basic income, who even has a bit of information, they need to hear the how. If that, we can still support you, but you need to tell us what kind of information you want to bring to the table. On the, actually, let's go on to the next slide, please. So on the coalition site, there's a tab that says actions. You'll see it says, if you go on actions and you click on it, the first slide will be an overview of easy actions. Mandy's also set up QR codes that you can take pictures of on the table. And there are a number of actions you can take depending on what your preference is. Again, looking at a federal level, looking at elections coming up, municipal level. Next slide, please. Or you can help us on the PEI project. And this can come from anywhere in the country. Specifically, there are 2 letters, and I'd like you to talk about the letters. I'll just set there's 2 letters. One is to Minister Suds. A few months ago, Coalition Canada sent a budget submission to Minister of Finance saying, look, a working group's been set up. Please indicate support. We're not asking you to put a dollar amount on this, but wouldn't it be great if budget 2025 says, hey, we're supporting the working group, a federal provincial PEI provincial working group. That was in the submission. There's a letter that we have drafted to Minister Suds saying, please, Minister Suds, tell Minister Freeland we want you to do this. This is really important and this is really timely. We need this done now. By mid-October, it's too late. So that draft is up there. And I want Trish to talk about the importance of those as well. The second letter is to send to your MPs, asking your MP to raise a question in Parliament saying, what's the status of the working group? So yeah, so Trish, back to you.
So why is this important then to get this support? I mean, obviously it is exciting that this working group has been struck. And I just want to just quickly note, just for detail's sake, the letter from our minister didn't actually suggest a working group. It reached out to the federal minister to ask if they would be willing to discuss basic income on PEI and what that could look like. It was actually the federal minister who suggested specifically the working group. And I do just want to note that distinction because it's quite exciting, actually. Our ministers and our premier actually in the past over several years have written letters to the federal government. And all we've gotten back so far was a general response like, oh, that's neat. You know, glad that you're looking at basic income. If you want any information that could be helpful, let us know, sort of thing. This was the first time we got a concrete action from the federal government. So the fact that they're willing to, federal minister is willing to dedicate resources to this type of working group, it is far from a commitment to have a basic income demonstration, but it is actually an essential step. They actually do need to figure out some of these details before it could move forward. So it's exciting, but it could end here. That could be it. Oh, thank you. Yay. It's great. This could be it. They could just stop here and we might not see anything happen. So you do still we need that push from the community, and we need people to continue to keep it at top of mind, write to the ministers, both the provincial and federal. And it would be great to get a question to the federal minister, because while I'm so excited to see that she's taken this interest in a PEI demonstration project, I'd love to know more about what's going to happen with that working group. It's an opportunity, but it's not a guarantee. And we need to see what's going to happen next. Is that, I don't know if that's helpful.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
So yes, so and the last point, so the panel coming up after this are, very experienced politicians at federal and municipal levels. And the question that Mandy has posed this entire group is, now what? Where do we go from here? And my suggestion, and I'm hoping our follow-up panel addresses this, is we as advocates, we need help. And by help, we need detail. We need to know who are the MPs, who are the policy people we should be reaching out to. It's not enough to just tell us, write to your MP. We will do that. We need to know which MPs. For example, Liberal is a Dominic LeBlanc. This is the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs plus more, and he's got the ear of the Prime Minister. How do we get to him? Can you make an introduction? At the NDP level, who should we be talking to? Are you our elected representatives, as well as Kim Pates, people in the Senate, and our municipal leaders? We need your help in opening those. This PI report has opened a pretty big window. We need to help to push it through. Who are the people we should be talking to? And are you, our officials and our leadership, prepared to give us the introductions to these people? It's really important. Everybody's busy and we get it. We need your help to do this. Thank you.
I think we have time for one question. Again, is there a question in the room? Okay. Census family. Hmm. Okay.
Yeah. I suggest you read the report.
Could you repeat the question before you answer it? Thank you.
Basically, the question is the census found an adequate way? So I mean, I'd suggest you read the report. A lot of this is explained. The census being taken every 10 years is not the same. It's not that every 10 years is defined. the census family is just a term, another way of looking at a family grouping. It's not dependent on every 10 years redefinition, okay? And I agree with you, the youth is a very complex area. So we do have a supplementary note there about that issue. So I strongly recommend you read that. And if you have further questions, again, just reach out to your local basic income person and we'll try to flesh it out. Anything else?
Yeah,
Jay?
just to add really quickly. So one of the major criticisms of the Ontario pilot that happened is that, so much money did go to young people who were from affluent families that it's not the target of the purpose of a basic income is to support people to make sure they can meet their basic needs, that there's a floor below which nobody can fall. And that's so much. And in fact, again, by using the census family, the cost of the program went down, 40%. Without actually impacting the numbers in terms of impacts on poverty reduction levels. It is, again, it's a complex one, but in terms of being able to move this forward, that criticism, that push that a basic income is going to give money to people who don't need it is a real problem and a real challenge for politicians. So this, using the census family helps address that issue and helps us to move forward. And I just wanted to note though, again, this is not to solve all problems. We have to address through this large scale program. You can address those gaps. Is that fair?
Yeah. And Manny just wanted me to address that if there's, for example, students in multiple housing, well, that student, when they're defined for tax purposes, still belongs to their family household. So that student housing isn't defined as an income unit. Like I said, it's complex and all of those issues have to be addressed. And there's one other question, Hannah, I remember there's a question you wanted us to address. I'll take the first half, you take the second half. So yeah, the first half. So market basket measure measures food, housing. So market basket measure should be reevaluated every year. And it depends on the area you live in. So as prices go up, so should the amount of basic income with respect to market basket measure.
And I guess just in terms of the potential for increased rents, again, this is where basic income won't solve everything. We do need good, rent control legislation, and we need to keep pushing our politicians to make sure that that is in place as well. So that is, that's a significant issue. That's a significant issue right now without basic income. So making sure that those protections are in place for renters is something that needs to happen as well. Again, we can't, it needs to be a push from the community. So keep those issues at the forefront also. But yeah, that's important too. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been really important in beginning to detail the how as well as the why, as you were saying, needs to be done if we're going to carry this conversation forward. So thank you both so much.